I'll just sculpt it myself, use it as an excuse to do an anatomy study. Just kind of building up the elements in Marvelous. So Marvelous I'll just use to find some interesting folds. So yeah, I try and make it like as authentic as I can, try and keep as much as I can in ZBrush, because it just makes things easier later. And then that kind of just gets pushed and pulled and reworked. 3ds Max is my kind of go-to for, you know, for low poly, UVs. I was kind of baking down the patterns and stuff. And then the baking's all in Painter, rendering's all in Unreal. Substance family, so Painter and Designer, and it's wrapped to it, so when it poses it kind of moves as well.
That's sick, dude.
So I wanted that kind of theme of Christianity to come through in him, to make him, you know, make him feel very devout, and, you know, it's a big part of his life.
It looks cinematic. Presentation at the end. The fact that it's Unreal is also the icing on the cake.
It took about a year overall.
Welcome to Pixel Peeps, the show where we take a closer look at some of today's best digital art, along with the artists that create them. Today, we're gonna be talking with Paul Widelski, who's currently a character artist at 100 Star Games. He's been in the game industry for a while. He's worked at Splash Damage and Guerrilla Games. And today we're gonna take a deep dive on his artwork, Saxon. This episode of Pixel Peeps is sponsored by Epic Games, the creators of Unreal Engine. Epic just held their State of Unreal event, where they went over all this year's updates and future plans for the engine. And they also post videos from their sessions onto their YouTube channel. So if you haven't already checked it out, obviously go check it out. I actually did a live reaction to the stream with members. Epic reached out to me about sponsoring a video to get the word out about the State of Unreal. If you haven't already seen it, obviously you should watch it. I put the link down below. And they also asked me to share my favorite parts of all of the new updates. And I was like, hell yeah, that's easy. If you've seen other videos on this channel, it might not surprise you that what excites me the most is the MetaHuman updates. And I really do think it's worth highlighting because it's super important. If you're into making digital characters like I am, like literally things that I have been trying to do for years, you can now do those things with Unreal 5.6 for free, you know, by using the engine. And specifically what that is using MetaHuman Creator locally, you can make better looking MetaHumans because they have higher fidelity textures, and you can change the body. And now they're enabling you to create custom MetaHumans. That's what I wanted to do. That's what a lot of people have been wanting to do. Now, you've always been able to make MetaHumans and customize them a little bit using the creator, but I mean fully custom, they're opening it up because now you can use what they're calling conform, where you can bring in your own mesh and then it will conform the MetaHuman rig to your character as long as your body, head, teeth, and eyes are the same topology. How do you get that topology? Well, you use the creator, you use their new body stuff to make, you know, generally the shape of your character, and then you can export it out in quads. Okay? That's huge, guys. It was always triangles. What this means is people like me, and I assume some of you, right? You can export the character as a base mesh. It's quadded out. And then in ZBrush, Maya, Blender, you do your normal stuff and you make whatever character you want. Then when you load that topology back in, boom, you get a state-of-the-art rig. And, you know, you can use XGen, which I've made videos about on this channel, to make high quality strand hair. And they're providing on their website an XGen Maya project to get started making grooms for MetaHuman. So if you adopt this like universal MetaHuman topology, all these doors open, you can make assets and put them on Fab. You can get assets from Fab and put them on your character. So super exciting. I love it. My next big character project, I'm going to use MetaHuman topology, and I'm going to show some of this stuff and hopefully make something cool for the channel. But that's obviously what I'm most excited about. And there's obviously other things like the control rig physics, cloth getting better, Lumen getting like twice as fast. I mean, there's, you know, on and on and on. All the updates are really exciting. The future is bright, obviously. I assume most of you guys have already seen, but if you haven't already, go check out their channel. Unreal Engine's got a bunch of videos. They're so open with their information. You know, they're teaching and sharing all this kind of stuff to help people like you, like me, make cool stuff at home, make cool projects. And I'm super happy that they wanted to sponsor this video. And Unreal is also the tool of choice by our guest artist today, Paul Widelski, who finished his character in Unreal Engine. So let's learn about his epic process to bring this character to life. Here's Paul. Enjoy. All right, cool. So let's talk about the Saxon. Epic work. As soon as I saw this, I just reached out to say good job. It's super cool. Yeah, man. I mean, the details and stuff. There's a lot I would love to chat about. So I think we'll start from the beginning, but I can't wait to get into this is amazing quality of textures and everything, dude. And the presentation at the end, the fact that it's Unreal is also the icing on the cake. An amazing work. Maybe quickly, we'll just start before we jump into the nerdy deets. Maybe you could just tell me the kind of, I don't know, just why you committed to this project in the beginning. Like, what's the start of you wanting to start this project? Did you have some overall goals in mind, or what drew you to it, that sort of thing? Like, why'd you start this one?
Yeah, so in my previous work, I like doing kind of deep dives into historical figures. Like I've done stuff from like kind of medieval Europe and did like a Japanese samurai. Also did some exploring into like kind of like Middle Eastern themes with my previous work. And I just wanted to kind of continue that. I've been watching a lot of like Viking, Saxon TV,
cool.
like Vikings, Valhalla, and Last Kingdom and stuff. Plus, my partner, she's a very big like history buff around this era, so I had a lot of source material to draw from. Also, I live in the UK, so I'm surrounded by this stuff. Yeah, I really love the kind of the patterning and detail, like kind of the cloth embroidery stuff that they do on this. Like it's so intricate, even though it's like the 8th century or whatever. Like I really enjoyed getting stuck into that, like seeing how they actually made it. There's a lot of good resources online, like kind of reenactors and people like very deeply interested in this period of history and how stuff was made, and all lots of information about it. And also from like the technical side, I just wanted to continue just seeing how much I could push in Unreal, because I use Unreal in my work, and I just wanted to take what I could learn and see how far I could push it in here. I wanted to do some like more advanced like material work, which kind of fed into the image you've got up at the minute, like all the patterning and stuff that kind of uses various multi-layered materials. We can dive into that later and
Hell yeah,
explore that.
Yeah, mission accomplished, dude. How long did this project take?
It took about a year overall. Kind of the first month was just like, well, first couple of months actually was kind of like gathering resources, doing some sketches, doing some like kind of studies of different patterning, like just kind of finding lots of reference online that was relevant, to that era, and also kind of doing some studies from the more sort of like the Hollywood end, like kind of taking the sort of the historical piece, but kind of jazzing up a bit to make it a bit more
great.
kind of like cinematic in a way. So I did that for a couple of months. That was a lot of sketches. I'm not a concept artist, but I like to do a lot of drawing. So I was trying to flex that muscle a bit, see if I could like take something to final and work from that. Once I got something that I was kind of happy with, I started, doodling in ZBrush. I did like a concept sculpt that I like to get all the elements I can in the concept sculpt, and then see if I've got something I want to take to final. And then then it's just the process from there.
Okay, great. Anything special about researching? Or are you just, like you say, I guess just Google, and then some of the documentary stuff maybe you're talking about, like getting into that, and then are you stealing images from that, and are you using PureF to build a big board kind of thing?
Yeah, so I've got like a massive kind of initial PureF board that I've just kind of like dumped stuff I found on Pinterest, stuff from TV shows, stuff from museums, any kind of websites or blogs that have like kind of explorations of how stuff was made at the time. Put that all together, and so I just have like kind of visual library of stuff to draw from. And kind of like I'll have sort of target quality from games and work I've seen online. I'll have more reference from kind of similar games at the time, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I had lots of really nice concepts from there. Really cool stuff to draw from there. And then I'll start organizing that into Trello. I use Trello a lot to kind of just organize myself. So kind of like my own Jira.
Yeah.
Thing.
Interesting, dude. Whoa.
Because there's so many moving parts. Well, not move, but there's so many parts to this, and something that you think of in January, you might forget by the time you get to it in August or whatever, So I kind of always note down like any kind of like cool thing I see, or sort of cool technique I see people using. I'm like, okay, just remember to use that for when it comes to the hair or when it comes to the end bit.
Whoa, cool. Have you ever looked at or considered Notion?
No, I haven't used Notion. What's that?
It's a note app kind of thing. It's free and you can do Trello board styles on there, but
Oh,
it's
cool.
deeper than that. Take a look at it when we get done. I'm addicted to it now because I've never got into anything like that, but Notion because of how flexible it is on how you display stuff because you can just make notes like I'm using notes right now. I'm using Notion
Hmm.
right now to keep track of, your work and the things I want to ask you about it. But then you can tag stuff and display it. So it can be a one-stop shop for everything, but I know how it is. Once you get enough like notes, switching platforms is like, do you really want to do that? But anyway, something to look at because I use the Gantt board or whatever it's called.
Oh God, I've forgotten the name, but yeah,
I
I know what
forgot
you
the
mean.
yeah Kogan board or whatever it is.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Kanban, is it, or
Kanban
something?
board. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use Kanban boards too for my content. Yeah. So anyways, it's great and yeah. So I've never heard anyone use Trello before, but the board
Hmm.
style is useful.
I think just because I must have gotten recommended it like 5 years ago
I
or
know.
something.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll stick
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll check it out. Cool.
Yeah, check it out, Notion. Yeah, it's great. Especially looking at like how nerdy and deep you get into stuff, dude. I think you'd have a lot of fun if you're down to just like start afresh or move your library over. Like you can get so granular and also so simple with it. And yeah, with the stuff you're doing with it sounds like historical stuff and accuracy and references. I think it'd be great. Maybe really quick summarize. With the project, like what are the main software that you use to complete it, and then maybe we
Hmm.
could jump in and take a look at some of the early material you were talking about.
Sure, yeah. So, ZBrush is the main stuff where I'm sculpting everything. I'll kind of try and keep as much as I can in ZBrush because it just makes things easier later. 3ds Max is my kind of go-to for low poly, UVs, any kind of like in-between bits,
Mm-hmm.
like I was kind of baking down the patterns and stuff. And then the Substance family, so Painter and Designer, my main for texturing. I used Rism for face texture because I wanted to kind of like maximize that UV space, but generally I'll use 3ds Max for UVs, and then the baking's all in Painter, rendering's all in Unreal. Oh yeah, of course, yeah, Marvelous Designer as well for folds.
What about hair?
Hair was all done in Max, so it was just hair cards, and
Wow.
then just kind of because Max has some kind of has very like simple sculpting tools, but it's great for hair because you just kind of need to just sort of shift it into that flow, and yeah, once you get in the kind of the work flow of it's quite quick to make hair in Max that way.
Yeah, it's great hair too. Damn. All right, Rism. I've never crossed the bridge there. Is it what all that they say? People are all about Rism, like the new wave. I just think I don't know. Is it worth you learning something new? It's interesting to hear you say that you do a face because unwrapping a face is tricky most of the time.
Yeah, so Max is the its UVs are really like UV system's really good. Like I've used it for a long time, but kind of specific things like because with the face you want quite kind of you almost want to sculpt the UVs for the face. Like you kind of want to like move things that have more focus, like the eyes and the mouth, but you want to sort of like shift back stuff like top of the head, side of the head. And Rism has like some nice tools to help that, and also it's very fast. Like Max it just chugs when it comes to UVs sometimes, especially like very dense ones. But yeah, it was really handy for that Rism.
Okay, great. Yeah, I might eventually. I'm gonna try it. All right. Well, it'd be great to see some behind the scenes and some of the work in progress files of this. Maybe would it be too much to see? Like, would you mind sharing any of those early sketches? I don't know if you have them or
Yeah,
your
of course.
reference board. Like, I think people love seeing like how things start, how things finish, and that
Sure.
process of getting things going and everything. Even your Trello board would be so fascinating for people. I'm sure. Oh, yeah, there we go. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit chaotic, but it was kind of this is where I start when it comes to when I'm doing the kind of initial concepting phase.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like grabbing stuff and kind of like chucking it all into a board to kind of get a general sense of the kind of thing I want to make, and also kind of like finding any kind of cool stuff that I thought would be a nice kind of addition. Quality targets as well from like other
Mm-hmm.
games, other people's sculpts. Yeah, some kind of like early hairstyle ideas here.
Nice.
I try and kind of like cover everything, like down to like shoes, the kind of wear and tear, like the pose reference, mood as well, drawing from anything that kind of looks fun or kind of inspires me. Like this was a really cool painting that was in like a Scottish church in Glasgow we went to see all the way around. I kind of really liked that old school approach to kind of medieval stuff. It has a certain charm to it, like this kind of stuff out of like textbooks
Yeah.
from my childhood kind of reminds me of that a bit. Yeah, so like some armor from Pinterest and various TV shows, like the Last Kingdom TV show I uses a lot of inspiration for character mood and also the the actual clothing style as well. I thought they had some really interesting stuff there. Yeah, so here was, so obviously patterning and embroidery is a very big part of it. So I did a lot of kind of investigating into the kind of art of the time. There's lots of like manuscripts and kind of religious texts that were kind of like had this lovely like ornate additional
Wow.
designs to everything. So I did a couple of drawing studies of stuff like this just to get myself into the kind of mindset of it, because I'm just for like for the year or whatever that I'm making this, I'm just engrossed in this stuff, to the point where at the end of it I'm like, I don't want to see this stuff ever again. But at the time,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And that seems like it's part of the fun for you. Just like it's an immersive project.
Yeah, exactly. I love
Kind of gives you reason too to like watch this show and I'll watch this, and it's like all encompassing. Well, yeah, it's like an epic work, and you're like, yeah, you're traveling around doing research, and what's cool is you're creating something. It's different than starting with concept art or having a deadline on a project. You're kind of soaking it all in and then seeing what comes out.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of just take the time to engross yourself into it. It's really fun. Also, just in terms of additional sort of research, like I bought a couple of books of the time period, so I kind of like chopped out some images of stuff from there. Like there's a lot of kind of like extrapolating and kind of filling in the blanks that you got to do, because stuff can be quite obscure or low res. So kind of taking TV shows, kind of like what's other people's art of the time is like, and kind of merging all those kind of things together and seeing what I can make.
Yeah, awesome. And is that your concept art then that you're eventually producing? And I guess you're just adding stuff over time, like once you are boiling this stuff down, just the stuff you like the most floats to the top kind of as you connect these things, and it's kind of you're finding the costume design that way.
So here's my kind of timeline of this.
So sick.
This was the first sketch of this guy. I'm just like throwing everything. I'm just like, he's got chainmail, he's got armor, he's got a cloak, he's got a shield. All the stuff goes in, and then I kind of like start to funnel down to what I think is cool, what would look cool, and what kind of is representative of the time. So this was another guy just kind of exploring more chainmail and gambesons. I kind of chucked the cloak eventually because I felt it kind of takes up too much of the space and can look a bit wonky. I lost the cloak and went with more stripped down kind of guy. So I think here I've started to sort of find something I like. Like he's got some chainmail on his arms and kind of similar to what he ended up being. So here I've found the pose and the kind of general style I want, and now I'm just kind of refining the different elements of it. So I'm kind of like slowly adding kind of secondary details, like kind of like buckles and bits of armor that kind of eventually went, but they're kind of still part of the process.
I see your notes on the side too are really interesting.
At the time, that they're very religious. They're big Christians, and they're kind of very much against the Viking pagans. So I wanted that kind of theme of Christianity to come through in him, to make him feel very devout, and it's a big part of his life. So I've got kind of like just keeping the kind of cross theme throughout it. Like it's always good to have like themes in your character. It kind of really helps to fill in gaps when you reach certain blocks in design. So yeah, I'm just kind of like adding additional pieces, and there'll be some, you'll kind of get to a point when you're like, it's like, oh, it looks good, and then you kind of add a piece, and then in context doesn't, you have to go back. There's like lots of ups and downs when designing characters like this. You've got to kind of keep yourself motivated.
What do you do to keep motivated?
Just try and kind of keep that final image in your mind. Just kind of see what the project is gonna look like, and not be too focused on what it looks like right now. Focus on the parts that are working, and kind of think I want to support those working parts with the rest of it. But yeah, here I'm just kind of starting to block in some color. In projects before, I've kind of left color to the end, which kind of tripped me up a bit. So I wanted to make sure that kind of thing was sorted out before I started sculpting. So like before I start sculpting, I wanted to make sure like everything is in place. Like I don't want to leave anything to chance, because otherwise you kind of just end up going in circles. So yeah, just kind of blocking colors in, starting to add in more finished elements. Like for example, like all this patterning here, I did in like a separate file. So I kind of just added it into the master file to kind of see what it looks like in context. Like here's the kind of interlocking bear patterning that was also explored in a different file that I can go through. Yeah, that's kind of how it ended up. Oh, and yeah, so even when you think you're finished, you can still kind of go back and be like, actually, maybe let's try something else, like for this armor. And yeah, just some notes here. Again, stuff to remember in 6 months' time when it comes to texturing. just to make sure it's, this kind of wool and, it's got the kind of embroidery done in this kind of style, etc. I even went and bought some diamond twill wool, it's called, off Etsy, just like a sample, just to kind of have something in front of me as reference, because that's always the best kind of reference.
Did you, or have you ever experimented? Because I've always wanted to and not had strong enough reason that in the Substance Suite, you can like apparently put a swatch in there and then it will create a tileable with all the different channels and everything. Have you done that?
No, I just like to do it myself.
Nice, cool.
I really just like to, because I've got the time to do it. It's a personal project, so I want to like do as much of it as I can myself. I mean, there are some times where I will, kind of take some shortcuts, like for example, like the wooden planks that he's standing on from like mega scans, like it's
For the environment.
It's just like background set dressing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, this is extremely well planned. That's my takeaway so far.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of part of the goal of this as well, because I found myself, like I mentioned before, that you kind of can get stuck in circles a bit if you don't plan everything.
Sure, yeah. It takes a lot longer if you're trying to problem solve in the 3D kind of production side of things. Just takes longer to restart, and better if you can figure it out beforehand, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't want to be kind of in the flow of sculpting and then you're like, oh, I got to go back and design some embroidery. It kind of you don't want to break that flow up. You just want to kind of be like, right, I'm in the designing stage, I'm in the sculpting stage, I'm in the technical low poly stage. I don't want to keep going back. I mean, there's always been some crossover. Like sometimes stuff doesn't look like you expect it to in context. You might have to go back, or you kind of missed a section, but just try not to be too discouraged by that. Like it's just part of the process.
I'm just writing a note for something later. Well, could we take a look at an early like ZBrush file to see what that looks like when you're starting? And I'm curious, like when you pose them too, and just in general, like what it looks like when you are starting the project in ZBrush.
Sure, yeah, I'll bring up. Okay, so that's extremely early. That's when I'm just kind of blocking out the kind of overall.
And what are you starting with for a body shape?
I'll just sculpt it myself, just use it as an excuse to do an anatomy study.
Wow.
And kind of, because, his body is a character in itself.
Yeah,
I wanted him to feel, kind of bit, he's like a seasoned warrior, but he's also, he's getting on a bit, he's getting a bit around his belly, he's getting a bit fatter. So I kind of wanted the kind of age of experience to kind of come through as well.
What I'm hearing, and that's so cool, is like you're starting, is an excuse to do an anatomy study again. So you're learning, you're taking your time. You're also, trying to keep in mind the character itself, what kind of body he would have. And then because you're going to build the costume on top of that, there's going to be some knock-on effects that like you can't exactly see, but it would look more like this person wearing clothes. And then in the end, you're not showing the body at all. It's not part of that final presentation. It does influence his final look in a way, in maybe more of an imperceivable way, but it makes him definitely a lot more believable. And then you just, enjoy the process of starting early like that, and you're brushing up on your anatomy skills.
Yeah, exactly. It informs the overall character.
Yeah.
And it's just an excuse to do some anatomy.
Are you starting with like some kind of a human shape or like a sphere, or what are you doing? Is it Dynamesh?
Yeah, it's just Dynamesh sphere and then pulled out and then sculpted in.
Cool. What do you do about scale? Because starting with a sphere in ZBrush always fucks up scale,
I actually, to make sure it was Unreal compatible, I got an extracted Unreal mannequin. And then kind of after I did initial sculpting, I kind of scaled it up to that.
Cool.
Just to make sure that I'm kind of, nothing gets too messed up when it gets all in Unreal.
So now what we're seeing, how much here is sculpted, and is there any marvelous sims going on? This looks pretty well on.
So this is kind of, I think, just starting to replace the kind of original sculpt with some marvelous. Actually, here we go. So this is the rough sculpt. Like you can see, It's very blobby. It's just about, the proportions are still a bit funny, but it's just about getting the kind of a representation of everything in there. Like, even though they're kind of just very basic, just get the buckles in there, because everything kind of affects stuff around it in context. Stuff will affect the silhouette, like the sword. I don't like to leave too much to chance. So I
can tell. Like, that's great. Very methodical. What are the kind of things now at this stage, right? You're blocking in, once you get things in there, as you say, the context starts to emerge of things next to each other. You want to get a sense of the silhouette and how things look together, I assume. What are the kinds of feedback you're looking for, and what kind of changes do you make, if any, at this stage? Are you ever like, with what you learn here, what you see here, decide move this, move that, change this, or anything?
Yeah, a couple of things kind of arise. It's about seeing stuff in context. Kind of, does this tunic work? Does this kind of skirt mail does it all work together actually in 3D? And then kind of seeing where stuff doesn't, I guess, make sense in terms of layering, because there's lots of like different layers of clothing. Just making sure that stuff kind of is realistically together. Like I've had in the past where I've kind of sculpted something or come to the end, near the end of it, and I've realized, oh wait, hang on, there'd be like, a bit of tunic or chainmail sticking out of here, and I've totally missed it, and it looks completely wrong. It's kind of about making sure that those mistakes don't arise. Yeah, just seeing that there's kind of enough areas of visual interest, like is stuff maybe too boring in one area or too noisy in one area, and just trying to find that balance in 3D.
Yeah, so it is really a continuation of the design. You're getting more information in context now to see where you need to push more, focus more. Are you ever going so far as to block in like the values and stuff for the concept to see? Because that always changes things to me. Is once, so if it's not all one color, like it really makes, gives you different patterns and things.
Yeah, I'll do some like just kind of basic, like just gray values, just to see how stuff kind of looks together.
Cool.
With this guy, he's kind of, it's almost like a half and half split. He's just kind of like mainly browns at the bottom of the body, and then kind of like lighter blues and grays at the top. A very simple split. Have a nice balance there.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's looking good already. And so then when you make the transition to Marvelous, are you bringing in that base body you made, as kind of the base shape, and then trying to recreate, some of the stuff you sketched? So you're, starting from nothing essentially on the tunic, and you're trying to use Marvelous to get something like that.
Yeah, so let me bring up. So here, like, is the base body, and then
it looks like you simplified it a bit and kind of melted it so it's simpler.
I think it's just a lower subdivision
cool.
of it. Yeah. Just because my computer just falls over if there's too much simulation. And then just kind of building up the elements in Marvelous. So Marvelous I'll just use to find some interesting folds and some good basis for the flow. Like I resculpt a lot after this. Like it's very much just like a starting point for me, because Marvelous, like, it gives you a lot of realistic good folds, but it gives you a lot of like wonky stuff that maybe looks a bit too noisy or kind of doesn't really work in the context of the rest of it.
And Marvelous also, can sometimes look like Marvelous, if you know what I mean. I don't know what exactly, but it does. Yeah,
that sometimes. Raw Marvelous feel is kind of just something I really want to avoid. So I'll take this in, and I think this might have been an old sim, but you can see the rawness of it, and then that kind of just gets pushed and pulled and reworked.
And when you remesh it too, you get a really nice, you're building it in Marvelous, it kind of fits. It has to, it adds the stitches and stuff. Like I didn't spend too much time in Marvelous, but seeing how much into authenticity and everything you are, you're really going to get a model that is pretty genuine, because you have to start with flat patterns and you have to fit it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, again, like similar to the body sculpting underneath, even if it's not exactly there, the DNA as you're building on top of it, like the net result is, it's been a continuation from how it would have been made. So there's something from an authenticity point of view that I can see makes a lot of sense for what you're doing.
Yeah, I found some like patterning of how they would have potentially done it at the time. They have kind of an interesting kind of stuff here going on.
Interesting.
I try and make it like as authentic as I can, but sometimes you will have to take shortcuts and kind of add some extra seams and stuff in ZBrush later. So once that's kind of I'll just bring something up from a bit later. I've got like 150 versions of this.
Hell yeah, dude.
You get burnt once with a corrupted file, and then you never again.
Yeah, I unfortunately it took me a couple of times, but now I learned my lesson. How big is your hard drive?
I got 4 terabytes.
Okay, yeah, good. Cool.
It fills up very quickly.
Yeah.
So at this stage, I've reworked a lot of the Marvelous. I can see a bit of the rawness there.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of almost have his meat gut kind of pushing out a bit.
Accurate gut, yeah.
Yeah. They can feel a bit more rounded. And so this is kind of that intermediate stage. So I've still got kind of like the initial blockouts of stuff here. Kind of made the belts a bit more kind of detail just to, because they can affect the silhouette a lot. They can also affect the folds as well. So it's good to have them.
Yeah, definitely. And are you using dynamic subdiv for those?
Yes, I am, just for the thickness. So I'll
Yeah.
make them in Max and then bring them in here just to,
Yeah, I love that. For belts, I love keeping it dynamic as long as possible.
Yeah, it's really handy. And then, once I got them to a stage I like, I'll properly go in and sculpt over the belts. Yeah, so that's kind of
So
the
yeah, as you're
stage.
progressing, replacing these blockout models with the final ones and just continuing on.
Yeah, exactly. Like this was initially Marvelous, and then this is a bit more further on. It's been Z-meshed and sculpted over. These kind of have stayed like this. I generally will kind of try and tackle what I think is the biggest problem area first, or I'll start from the bottom up, because if you start at the bottom, you'll kind of take the stuff you've learned and apply it to the more important areas at the top. I knew that the tunic would have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of kind of like technical considerations, because I'll have a second UV set and other effects on it later. So I kind of worked mainly on that at the start, just to kind of make sure that, like, right, okay, I've kind of figured that section out. I can go back and do the stuff that I'm more fluent with.
Yeah. The pants, are they at a done spot now too?
They're still, I guess they're kind of close to raw Marvelous. They've had a bit of cleanup over them. Do you want me to switch to the final one?
Yeah, and I'm noticing some differences between this and that. So it's be curious like to hear. I don't know when you do those switches, but like the chainmail on the arms, for instance, you change how long they are.
Yeah, so initially I kind of wanted to go all the way up to the arm, like it kind of worked in the 2D. And in the 3D, it kind of means you lose kind of visual interest from the folds.
Yeah.
Chainmail doesn't give you, it's quite kind of simple. I kind of later changed it to be more kind of like cut off, kind of more, I feel a bit more cruder, a bit more used. And
yeah, dope.
Switch to the final guy.
Yeah, let's see the final. All right. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. So you cut off the chainmail and stuff in the high poly. I don't know why for a second I was like, oh, you could do it later in low poly. But yeah, obviously. So because of your planning and how you want to make sure you're confident for the next stage, you figure out the design in the high poly. Would you say, like, obviously you leave yourself some room, but you're trying to get to at the end of this high poly phase, you're like, yep, this is it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to kind of do as much as I can here to not have any kind of unexpected surprises later.
Yeah.
In a previous project, I probably left too much to Substance Painter. Like I kind of left too much of the texturing stage, and I wanted to kind of bring that back more to ZBrush. For example, like the memory folds and the kind of like secondary, tertiary elements like that. Stuff like kind of wrinkling and deformation on the belts as well. I wanted to keep more on the high poly because it's just easier. Also things like chip damage, like
okay,
I could do that in Painter, but I just find it a bit more easier to kind of get a more natural look in ZBrush.
Yeah. So this is obviously based on your experience. I can see that you have some things in here, like on the leather, which is kind of a memory fold of itself, of the pattern that it's always getting from it getting dry and bending. But you're leaving yourself room to do stuff in Painter. So you just know based on your experience, I guess. But if you, this is a common question I get, if you could speak on what you decide to put in your high poly model, what you decide to leave for texturing in terms of detail, actual like height, normal map stuff. Is there any rule of thumb you go by, or how would you describe how you make a decision when to add it where?
Yeah, generally stuff that kind of has to feel a bit more natural, I'll leave to the sculpting stage. So if you want a kind of like repeatable pattern, it makes sense to do it in Painter. You have a lot more control over it, and it's just a lot faster to do. Like I was saying earlier, like stuff like memory folds and like chip damage maybe kind of like falls in the middle. It can be a bit of a personal preference. I find it is easier to just resolve that stuff in the high poly. Then you have basically a more finished piece to kind of reference yourself. And also it's a bit more fun to do it in high poly. Like it is fun to just, just put on a podcast or something. You just go in there and just do some chip damage, do some detail, and yeah, that's the kind of the fun of it. It's kind of the reward at the end of it. It's like you've done all the heavy lifting. Now you can just go in and just tweak it to your heart's content.
Absolutely, yeah. Might be worth mentioning for anyone, because I think here's the thing: the instinct and the desire is to put it all in the high poly. I will say, okay, and makes a better looking high poly, which is fun, and also maybe you want to show it off later. So if you're doing a personal project, I would say for the most part, yeah, do whatever you want. Obviously, it's your project. And then doing it in a high poly, as he said, is fun. And then when you bake, you do get some extra detail that is deriving from the edges and the things that you're doing. So it informs that. Just in case people aren't aware, like what is the trade-off? It's just iteration time. If you want to make a change, you have to go back to the high poly and say like in the chipped, belt buckle there. If you wanted for some reason, you're like, you know what, it would be better to not have these chips on the top. You have to go back to the high poly. Hopefully you have a version that doesn't have the chips, or you have to like really ghetto fill that in, then rebake and all that. So it makes your iteration time huge, whereas in Painter or something, you're just changing it in a second. Anyways, that's the trade-off. So in productions, sometimes, to play it safe, you keep it dynamic so that you're not burned by iteration. But as you said, as a personal project, it's fun to go above and beyond, as we've seen so far. Like you're going farther than you need to, which is part of the fun you're having. So yeah, obviously putting in the high poly would be great, and you get all the control. You get to put exactly where you want. And there's something about the commitment too. You're like, I'm not gonna change this later. Let's go. This is my thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like working in production and working on a personal project is kind of like two different mindsets.
Definitely.
When it comes to decisions like that. To kind of think of what's the kind of most bang for your buck, like what's speedy and what's also good quality as well.
About that, I kind of half expected, I don't think it'd make a big difference, I see your arms on the other side, kind of have expected high poly to be posed. Did you not do that because you could animate him? Like he's like a production character, like it's like a game character kind of. So I'm not sure, maybe you could just speak a little bit about your goal. Like did you try to get him within a production range too, cost-wise? Like, is he reasonable triangle count? I know you have hair cards. Did you want to put him on the mannequin rig and have him run around? Because you could probably do that pretty easily in Unreal.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to kind of like follow a game pipeline, so he could potentially be like a properly rigged character. I didn't take it so far as to animate it, but I did do a kind of simple rig that I could pose him in, and then kind of that gives me the freedom to do any kind of additional tweaks, and I'm not kind of locked into a pose. It means that if when I pose him I find any issues, I can still go back up the pipeline, resculpt and rebake all the way back down. It's kind of like making sure that at any point I can change something without having too drastic of effect on the rest of it.
Yeah,
which is
I mean, it looks
big projects.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks like he could have been simmed in this pose. So it's not a crazy pose, but like the shoulder down, the arm down, for instance, that can look not so hot sometimes, but it looks great, Yeah, all right. Well, cool. How'd you do the low poly? Are you going full on, like polygon by polygon? Or are you doing any automatic stuff to save time because personal project? How deep are you going? Or do you have a triangle count in mind?
Yeah, let me bring up the low poly. So I guess the try is pretty high because of the beard. Like it's like 750,000. It's just because I kind of went over the top with the hair and the beard. It's probably a bit more reasonable without them. Yeah, I guess like 500,000 for a main character.
Nice.
That seems about right.
I mean, I would tell people too. I mean, for portfolio, like what you did, I mean, it's great. I mean, it looks, why skimp on quality? You can always make it lower quality. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you want something to stand out, you're doing the game workflow, you're doing real-time workflow, you can always go down, but you can't go up. So yeah, why not shoot for the moon?
Yeah, exactly. You can always strip out edges or pull things back. Like it's kind of, it's best to kind of push it as far as you can. You can always bring it back.
I mean, look at the lint. Like, look at the lint we have here, dude. Whoa, so cool. Yes. Dude. And the result came out great too. I was gonna ask if you use curves or something. It'd be easier to use curves in a way, but this is nice, and it's catching the light too. It must be the hair shader doing the work, but yeah, this is a nice result. I assume you use some kind of scatter.
Yeah, so there's it's just like a modifier in Max just to scatter it across it. Then it's wrapped to it, so when it poses, it kind of moves as well.
Ooh, dude! Look at it pose like that. Oh man, that's sick, dude. Damn, he looks sick.
So that's how I like to do the posing, kind of like a small animation, just to kind of see if anything kind of crops up.
Yeah, I was like, you went above and beyond there, because it's not just a one frame prop, you moved it out so we could see him move. Looks awesome. How come? Is it just me? Let me see. Like, in scrolling all the way down, I don't see an image on the far side. Is there a reason for that? The opposite camera angle. Because like, there's a cool slit in his sleeve. You see him holding his sword. Like, how come no
You mean
mid
from
shot
this
from, yeah, like,
angle?
yeah.
I just didn't think it
Okay.
worked. Like I'll do lots of different angles, like kind of like just trying to find, some cool
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and obviously the ones you put on, they're great. I just wonder if you're hiding something or not. Because I mean, you don't even get a full look at that sword. I don't think that he has his hand on. We get some nice close-ups. Yeah, just wondering because it looks cool from all angles. So yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah, I
Cool.
mean, sometimes it just doesn't work. Like I would have loved to have a shot like this, with the sword, but I'll do lots of tests. I'll like flip the image to see what it works, and kind of like there's so many things that affect it, like the lighting as well. And
Yeah.
when you pose stuff, you start to kind of stuff that's kind of hidden, kind of it gets exposed as
No,
well. So
absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't always work from all angles.
yeah,
And I really want to get to lighting and your presentation and your thoughts on it. I know maybe we could end in the actual Unreal project and talk about it because I have some questions. But before we
sure.
do, maybe talk a little bit about the texturing and the patterns specifically. Like it seemed like you use Substance Designer. I love when people do great. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like it's essentially micro detailing patterns. Like there's some people that they really get that looking great. And you mentioned a second UV set. So in general, maybe you could speak on that, like the process you did, how you do it, and yeah, maybe your thoughts, because I assume you're really into it to get to this level. Because some of these close-ups are insane. I wanted to ask you about the stitches too.
Hmm.
There's stitches that are obviously done in some way because the resolution's great. I mean, what the hell? So yeah, maybe just micro detail and embroidery in general. How are you doing that?
Yeah, sure. So kind of use a mix of Max and Substance Designer. Yeah, so
Oh, whoa. Okay. This is not what I expected. Cool.
that's the
Whoa.
main embroidery running along his tunic. So
Holy shit, dude. Okay, no wonder using Max. Okay, so you're building these with like
yeah,
splines and then using modifiers for like the noise and shit.
yeah, exactly. So
Whoa.
they're splines with an arrayed. No, they're a pattern arrayed on a spline. Sorry. So that this kind of 6 stitch, and then that's snapped to a spline. Let's bring them up.
Holy moly, dude. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks. So originally I wanted to do this in Designer, but it kind of, because there's so much, so many splines, it kind of started to chug a bit. And I felt I got a bit more depth in Max, the actual spacing in between weaving. I kind of wanted to get that sense of it actually going up and down over itself. I found it kind of got a bit more of an organic effect in Max. Sure, you could do it in Designer, just as well, but Max just works for me in this. Just really quick to make changes with the splines as well. So this was then baked down into a texture. So kind of various different masks were made from this. So you got the normal and kind of various stuff like ID random kind of gives like a random color and various effects that are then fed through into Designer, and then that's fed into Painter. So it's kind of like a 3-stage process. Let me get up the.
Is that so that are you going through Designer first so that you can like make something that's kind of dynamic in a way?
For this one, this was baked out just as is into masks. Then that
Yeah.
goes into Painter.
Okay.
Let me bring that up. It was the buckles that kind of had the 3-stage process, but for this one, is
Chainmail too. Chainmail is usually pretty difficult, or at least tricky. When people do it, tricky to make it look good. I assume it's on a plane too with alpha.
with the chainmail, I use the high poly for it just to get that variation and kind of more natural kind of look.
And then you baked it to a plane.
Yeah, just to a cylinder plane.
Just while you're doing that, I'm just gonna do this really quick, and you
Sure.
share again after, because I just want to get this shot here. Yeah. The level of detail and just the crispness in general that you're able to achieve at this resolution is bananas. This is really cool for a real-time model. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at right now the pattern that you were showing, and you can see those little, it comes out in a way. Again, epic. I love talking to people like you that are doing projects like this where going above and beyond, and it's getting filtered through the process where we don't see individual threads anymore, like how you started. The fact that these once were 3D models of threads, it does produce this work at the end that looks like it could be photogrammetry or something. Yeah, then we have the stitching here. We have these little stitches here that I want to hear about, like how you're doing that. And then even around, like the little wrinkles and just in general. This is one of those images that stood out. The fact it looks so great from far away, not far away, but normal mid shot that you have on your first image right here. It looks great. And then, the fact that you can just zoom in and blow people's minds is really cool. A really cool presentation and a testament to the work you're putting into here.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Cool. So this is the painter scene for the embroidery. So you can see it's on its own here because it has its own UV set. So it's like a 2K texture that's repeated. I mean, again, a bit overkill maybe for production, but for a personal project, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's kind of built up from the masks that's exported from Max. They're all fed through here. So we've got, let's see. Oh, yeah, so we've got the...
Yeah, so 2K texture, wow.
Yeah, that's all the stuff exported out of Max. That's all hooked up to the mesh maps, and then there's a bunch of effects. Like for example, using the ID random.
Yeah.
That kind of allows us to pick out some variation in the color. It ends up as noise, but it's kind of correct looking noise.
Exactly, it's following the threads. It's not just dot noise. Yeah. The variation on the light colored fiber is great.
And so
sick.
Underneath is the kind of wool texture, so it's kind of the impression it's kind of like a fine wool that's stitched to his tunic, and then on top of that the embroidery is kind of like fed through and ties it all down.
Yeah.
And and then aside from that there's kind of various effects like for the kind of like masks that get fed through into Unreal, because I wanted to have some L as well, just to kind of get that cotton effect, but I didn't want it everywhere. I wanted it just on the wool itself. It's these kind of personal projects where you kind of like you can go that extra step and just be like, I want all the effects and all the layering and all the masks. And,
exactly. It's like cathartic too. Especially it sounds you said you do Unreal for your job and you just have deadlines. You're limited and you can't change stuff. So it's like it's fun to be able to use those same kind of tools for fun and just play around, do things you aren't normally able to do. Or what about these stitches? I know I harp on stitches, but how'd you do them? It seems interesting because even what you're showing me doesn't have the stitches we see like down the middle. Yeah, and I'm wondering in general your approach to that.
See, what I've seen some games do is they do like an alpha plane of stitches across, and then that's kind of its own material. It kind of makes it a bit faster to do stitches rather than having a second UV set, which I've done in the past. And it gives you a better resolution and fidelity for the stitches as well.
Yeah.
Stitches can get quite blobby. They're baked down as normal maps. This kind of like gives the kind of like crispness from like a kind of like a middle distance for them. Like the UVs, they're just, they're all laid across.
Yep.
Just a simple texture.
Okay.
So I've got that kind of like let's just move this out of the way. That kind of repeating stitch there, and this one is for some other area. But that's that's the main pattern. That's repeated everywhere. It's just black and white here because that then gets colored actually in Unreal.
Yeah.
So I don't have to keep making new alpha textures.
Okay, and does it have a normal map on there and to get some of the? It looks like it does. So that whole, I mean, the effect is great. It really does feel like it's three-dimensional.
So it has a normal map. Like kind of pop it a bit, give it some catch the light a bit. Again, these were made. They originally started as 3ds Max meshes that were baked down. This gives me. It's just faster iteration, I find, just to model them in Max.
Wow.
Just because I've been using it for so long. So do you want me to jump into Unreal?
Epic. Yeah, man. I would love to see this coalesced in Unreal. If the GPU gods allow us.
Let me just get rid of some windows. Done marvelous. Done with that. All right, cool.
There he is. There's a boy.
There we go. Yeah, so let's just unlock the camera.
Yeah, great. Okay, so, what do you got going here? Different cameras, so different lighting setups?
Yeah, so I want to kind of, in the rendering pipeline, I want to kind of keep it as strict as possible, I guess. So I've got all the lighting is tied to different camera shots, different intensities of different lights. Like if we see it from just this angle, you can see as I kind of like go through the different angles, the lighting kind of changes.
Yeah.
It feels a bit cheaty, but you want to show,
no,
each
that's how they do it in the
up.
movie. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I saw a great breakdown of it was like a Resident Evil 2 cutscene, and every time the shot changes, the lighting like totally changes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So just kind of using
They even have
those
that
kind
in
of techniques.
Unreal now, shot-based lighting. Like there's even like a way to just do it in the sequencer. Normally, like it's called shot overrides or something. Like everyone does that. I mean, for cinematics, so yeah. We notice this shadow pattern too. This kind of gobo effect, like it's through slats or something.
Hmm.
Maybe just in general, talk about your thoughts on presentation for this guy, just in general, and then for this guy and what you had in mind, how you got here. Because the thing about lighting is, especially when people ask, like, how do you light something? It just seems like such an impossible question because every project I do is different. There's not like you put it here, here, and here. And this is obviously pretty unique with the shadow pattern. Not to put too much on you, but another thing is that I feel like is tied to this presentation and everything here is, to me, there's this really cool evolution that's happened where early on when you're doing your research and your concept and everything, it did feel like a authentic costume, project, but I feel like he's evolved into what you could like. He has like a main character energy. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what you want in a portfolio. He could have easily just been a guy in the background of a movie. Do you know what I'm saying? And and his costume itself doesn't exactly lend. I'm the hero or what have you. I do think now the quality of everything and the detail has taken it to that level. But his pose, the lighting, I guess his face even, there's the little eye highlight, a lot of cinematic stuff going on. Were you conscious of that? Were you ever concerned about him not standing out as kind of a main character or being? I just feel like the final result here is very attention grabbing. It's very intense. He seems like, he could be on the poster of some movie that you'd want to go see, and I just personally think that's interesting in and of itself. It makes me think that you have a lot of thoughts on presentation to have gotten here.
Yeah, so presentation is very important. Like it can be kind of as an afterthought because you're exhausted by the project by the end, but it's kind of like the last big thing to do. Like it's its own phase. I wanted to kind of sell the character of this guy. He's not just a mannequin for a costume. He's his own person. He has a story. He has a character. So I wanted to get the kind of impression of him. Like he's like a kind of like an early politician almost. He's like he's part of this Saxon village. Like he's at this, he's at the Great Hall. That's like where the kind of the lighting coming through the kind of wooden slats effect is. I'm getting kind of dust in the air from the kind of general unkept state of the town and the kind of the era that he's in. So I wanted to kind of get that moodiness across, the kind of the sun just peeking through the cracks and casting kind of interesting shadows on him and kind of picking out bits from that. Like the actual mesh itself, it's just like it's just that. And then that's kind of just been leaked as I go across to be like, I want a bit more lighting, kind of coming down the center of him, kind of like that kind of beam of light there kind of like picks out his face, the main thing on his tunic, on his belt buckle as well, and some more details. That's kind of the center focus point of the shot. And yeah.
What do you do for the eye highlights?
So the eyes, they're just metahuman shader. Then kind of cheat it a bit. Cameras and all these.
Oh, hey guys.
Yeah, just trying them out in different views as well. There's a lot of like, I guess, one-use lights in this. So there's like there'll be a light here just to sort of pick this area out a bit more because that's such an important shot for me. I wanted to kind of it's got like 3 lights here. So there's also I always add like a sort of exaggerated bounced lighting into the face because I don't want it to just be
Don't want to lighten up the shadows.
Exactly. You don't want to be obscured by shadow. You want to kind of like sculpt the face with the shadow. You want to show off your work, and that gives a nice like little bounced highlight to the eyes as well.
Okay, so that's where that's coming from. Is that kick right there?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Those little dots really help too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's such a key feature of the eyes, that little highlight, and if you don't have it, it just kills the realism.
Yeah. Great, man. Was it a straightforward process where you envisioned, okay, it's like this with the slats and everything, or did you go through many different versions and ideas about him? Should it be studio lighting? Should it be a sun? How much of a background should I go in? Because it's a sliding scale. You can get tripped up on that. This seems very focused at the end. Was that a straight line or did you experiment?
So at the start, I just have him in a pose with like, just very basic lighting. just kind of like 3-point lighting just to balance my textures and make sure everything's working. Then I'll take inspiration from kind of portrait paintings from the masters and stuff like that. Just kind of get a setup there, see how the painters of old did this kind of thing, because to get that kind of feeling that he's a man from the old time. So I wanted to kind of start there. Then once I wanted to get more sort of storytelling in it, I was like, what's this guy doing? Where is he? He's in this great hall. He's got a serious pose because he's trying to make his point to the king or make his point to the village. Kind of wanted to get that in the lighting as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, storytelling. I mean, yeah, in fact, I think you could have even shown the A pose in the presentation to show its full production. I mean, I almost thought it's just so efficient. Like by the end, it feels like, it was just directly, this is what it is. It's been great to see how far you've gone. There's also, maybe before I end on that, the hair light. Did you have a hair light right there?
Yeah,
is that an accident or do you have a rim light somewhere?
That took a lot of balancing to get the hair right, because you have you want to pick out the kind of the silhouette of the hair. You want to also not have that bleed through into the the rest of him.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple of
there it
planes
is
here
oh
that kind of just
to block.
Yeah, just to block out.
Look at that little one. Look, what's that little one blocking?
That one, one of those like 11th hour things. Like after I'd finished it, I was like, oh crap, there's a little like bit coming through. So that was kind of in one of the shots. It's kind of like picking out his shoulder weirdly. Let me find it. Can't find it. Sorry, but it was
But just stop light from bleeding through somewhere.
Yeah, it was just to stop. Yeah, like light coming out here and kind of drawing
your eye.
Too much focus to his collarbone, which I didn't want.
Okay, great. No, I'm glad I asked. I like to see. And this is normal. This is what lighting setups look like. That's why I think it's important for everyone. Everyone, I think, should understand and respect how important lighting is. It's not I guess you can go really deep with it, but I worry sometimes people intimidate themselves by it being some big scary mystery box that takes a lot of knowledge. It's really basic fundamentals, but understanding just like the key light, fill light, rim light, essentially relationship and what you want out of it, and then it's different every time. That's the thing that makes it personal, and that it could go on forever because there's an unlimited amount of configurations you could do for every project. So it's cool to see this one because we're seeing it where it doesn't look studio, it looks cinematic. He's got that storytelling element. I think that's why it looks cinematic, is that we're using those kind of principles that they would use in movies, and we're seeing it here to do kind of a heroic shot, but there's still some drama, still things in shadow. Really great, cool to see.
Yeah, it was very illuminating, like seeing how movies kind of it's not just like a straight, there's a light here and a camera here. There's tons of stuff happening around. There's people like holding things to bounce the light properly. There's so much more to lighting than just like a couple of lights correctly placed.
And obviously in 3D we should do whatever we want and whatever makes a shot. But just in case, sometimes people think, just in the spirit of authenticity, they might think putting a little blocker right here is cheating, or putting a little blah 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 is cheating. First of all, there's no cheating. I mean, you gotta not limit yourself in that thinking. But also, in case people don't know, nowadays for the last like 10 years plus, like every movie goes through a digital color grading process, and you can even download DaVinci Resolve for free and do this. Like if something was glowing, because they review shot by shot, right, when you're making a movie. So if there was like collarbone or like some lint that's bright, they would just lasso it, darken it, and track that pixel and do exactly what we're doing right now. I mean, you're just making the best image you can, and it's cool to see how much you're doing in Unreal. I mean, here's your render right here. You're using the real-time deferred rendering. The color grading, if anything, doesn't look much different than this at all. Like that's what's so fun about using Unreal like this too, is like you can move a light and like we're looking at your ArtStation presentation essentially in real time, and that's what I was excited to do. Yeah, really cool.
Like just to build on that, like there's a whole post-process volume I've got here that kind of does additional grading and stuff. Like I want to kind of keep as much as I can in here, just make it look as final as I can. Then obviously there'll be some Photoshop after just to kind of like sharpen do some sharpening, do some color balancing. Yeah, Unreal gives you a
Yeah.
lot of control over that final image.
Yeah, you're setting it all up so that you can just use the sequencer right here. You can use the movie render queue and export games. Are you doing like in 4K or anything bigger than that?
Yeah, 4K. Any bigger than that, and my GPU falls over, unfortunately.
That's cool. But are you doing like, more anti-aliasing and everything, right, to make it look as nice as possible? So it's not just like a game, I guess. It's like a cinematic.
Yeah, exactly. I'll whack
cool.
up the TAA.
Cool, man. Great. The point I wanted to end on was just, this is one of those things that happens that's great. Great for me, obviously, to keep learning it and experiencing it. I think good for anyone that's into this sort of stuff and wants to make big epic projects. I saw this project and it had such a strong first impression. It was like a visceral reaction the first time. Obviously, a lot of people engaged with it, but it just looked awesome. And the more you scroll down, the more detail you see, like, holy shit. So I contacted you. And so I've been wanting to get the story behind it. And I think it's one of those times where you hear it's not an accident. I worked on it, off and on for a year. I let it percolate through many iterations. I didn't stop. You just, every stage of the process, you're working to make it better. You're not holding yourself to any like strict standards. Like you just wanted to make it as good quality as possible and enjoy yourself. You went above and beyond and did things that aren't even in the presentation. So anyways, man, awesome, epic work. Obviously, like I've said, but I think also
Thank you.
motivating and to see like this is what it is. This is what it takes. It's not a magic trick. It's just you found something you're passionate about and a way to just continually work on it. Yeah. So man, thank you so much for being generous with your process and everything, man. It was great to see.
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about it. Post my progress on Polycount if people want to see it there, and happy to answer questions on that. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah, so if anyone hasn't already, obviously check out the work in the link below, and obviously follow Paul and whatever he does, and check out his links below. I'll link down your social media stuff and everything. And yeah, thanks again. And thank you for anyone that's listening. Till next time. Peace out.
Thanks a lot.